I've been working on this pattern that's called the Maneuver, and it comes from artgalleryfabrics.com, and this is kind of what it's looking like. I'm still working on cutting out fabric, so that's what we're going to be doing. This pattern is a 70 by 77 in its completed size. I was able to count 182 pieces that needed to be cut out, and that's not including the binding. So that is quite a few things to have to cut out for a quilt. I will leave a link to the quilt down in the description box below so that you can go and get it and do the quilt for yourself. It is a free pattern, so that's something that I was really excited about. When you print out your pattern pieces on the printer, you always have to make sure that they're printed at 100% or actual size, because that is a mistake that I have made in the past, to actually not print them full size. Sometimes that is a hack that you can use if you do want to make the quilt smaller by just printing out all of the pieces smaller though. I don't necessarily consider myself a quilter. I'm more of a garment maker, but I am making this one quilt because spring is coming and I like to make things a season or two ahead of time, so that by the time it gets to be fall and I actually need to wear the quilt, I will have it already prepared and already ready and not need to make a quilt when it's cold and not actually have one. I'm cutting with a pair of gingers. These are the shears that I typically use for cutting out the patterns pieces when I make garments. However, I find it quite easy to use the gingers for cutting around the curves of this pattern piece versus using the rotary cutter, because it's just easier to get into the curve. However, once I reach the top of this curve, I see that I need to switch to the rotary cutter. Now, I like and dislike using a rotary cutter for cutting out pattern pieces, because I have to roll over the material and roll back in order to cut the fabric, and I also have to apply pressure in order to get it to cut. And I do have a little bit of weakness in my hand, so it is problematic for me to use the rotary cutter for that reason. And I do wish that this pair of Fiskars rotary cutter had a rubber grip on it to make it easier on me. So I am thinking about actually switching to something with a rubber grip for that reason. Guys, what do you think about fabric and the thing that's happening with Joann's? I know that Joann's is potentially going bankrupt, and also other companies related to sewing are having problems because they're working with private equity firms. And I have a video about how Arrow, which is a company that makes furniture, how they have been acquired by a private equity firm. And you should go and check out that video. I'm going to try to leave a link to everything that I referenced down in the description box below. But yeah, a lot of companies are having problems as of right now, and I think that's just a sign of where our economy is right now. And I know that a lot of people are really bummed about the situation with Joann Fabrics, because Joann's is a company that sells fabric, and that's one of the only places that we can still go to purchase fabric. Well, I don't necessarily think that Joann's going out of business is a bad thing, because I've never really liked Joann's, and I really don't use Joann's that often. For this particular quilt, I only purchased 2 fabrics from there. And the reason is because 80% of the fabric that Joann's has is for quilting, and I am a garment maker. 2, the quilting cotton that they have is not of the very best quality. A lot of it is very thin and looks like it, I don't know, like it may have came from China or somewhere like that. It doesn't feel quality. So for that reason, I'm not really a fan of it like that. And also, they have a tendency to run all of these sales like 40-50% off, but the price on the items is so hiked up that by the time you use a coupon, the item that you purchase is the regular price that it would normally be anyway. So I just wish that they would just make things the regular price that they are, rather than deep faking us into thinking that we're getting a deal when we're actually paying the price that we would normally pay anyway. So that's why I'm not really a fan of Joann's in general. Let's talk about some of the other places where I was able to purchase fabric from. I got fabric from Hobby Lobby as well for this project. Actually, the material that I'm cutting out right now came from Hobby Lobby. My main gripe with Hobby Lobby is that a lot of their quilting cottons are florals, and if they're not florals, then they feature animals, like a woodland kind of theme, I guess you would say. And that's not necessarily my particular style. I'm not really one to enjoy a ton of floral fabrics, but I was able to get some solids there that I really did enjoy. So I was good with that, and I did use only the 2 floral fabrics, just because that's what was available and it fit my color palette that I had. Outside of Hobby Lobby, I went to Walmart, and Walmart too has fabrics at select locations. But while I was at Walmart, I heard some very interesting things from the associate that was there. The associate that was there actually worked in the fabric department, and it's very uncommon to have an actual associate that works in the fabric department cutting your fabric. One of the problems that I've always had with going to Walmart to get fabric cut is that the person's cutting the fabric is not from that department, so they don't know how to cut the fabric out correctly. And sometimes you get less fabric than what you paid for. Other times you get a little bit more. And sometimes it's cut wonky, so you can't actually use all of the fabric that you actually did get. So that is problematic in that way. And as far as the fabric is concerned at Walmart, most of it is a country style, and I'm not sure that that is just due to the part of the country that I am from, or if that is across the board. I do know that Walmart is moving away from selling fabric for the most part, and there's only one store in my local area that even carries fabric, and I can understand why they would move away from it, because their associates don't have experience with cutting fabric and they don't know anything about it. So it's like they're having to be pulled from another department in order to cut the fabric, and then any cutoffs they're actually losing money on. So I can understand why they wouldn't want to do it. The last place that I got fabric from was actually a place called Linen and Curtain Outlet. I sometimes buy my fabric from Linen and Curtain Outlet because it's just a way that I can get a lot of fabric for cheap. They're meant for curtains or for bed linens, but sometimes it's better to buy it that way because you can get more fabric for less money. And that is an ultimate hack for anybody who is a beginner in sewing, because you can get some really good quality fabrics that way. And this particular Linen and Curtain Outlet that I went to also had some fabric, and I was able to buy a couple yards from them that matched my color palette that I'm using for this quilt. So that was a really good thing. Now, I know that the prices of fabric are continually going up, and this is why a lot of people are turning to using fabrics from thrift stores or garments from thrift stores and cutting them up to make other things. However, that is not necessarily a best case scenario, because a lot of the times that fabric has already been worn and used, and if you're going to be spending hours working on a project, you want the best fabric possible to make that outfit or that garment last as long as possible. So that's really not ideal, but I do know that a lot of people are turning towards that. And when the conversation about fabric comes up, people always want to divorce the fabric from what is going on in society, but you can't really do that because the cost of the fabric actually is a reflection of what is going on in our society. I do have a full video here on YouTube about why the prices of our fabric are increasing so much, and you ought to go and check that video out, and that's also going to be in the description box below. But long story short, back in 2021, the Biden administration banned all cotton that came from the Xinjiang province, which is where the Uyghurs live, and the Uyghurs were being forced into labor in forced labor camps. Pardon me. I'm going to turn this audio down just a little bit. I am using a pair of electric scissors to cut out fabric because I have gotten tired of using the gingers and the rotary cutters to cut my fabric. This is a lot faster than using either one of those scissors. However, the problem with using the electric scissors is that it is harder to control, so it's harder to get a even cut. So what I'm having to do is to cut things out with the electric scissors and then go back in with my rotary cutter to shore everything up. Now, I know that some of you who are actual quilters probably do have some better techniques for cutting out fabric, but this is just what I am doing because I'm just working as I go. But anyhow, the Uyghurs were forced into labor camps, so the United States put sanctions on them, but that affects us in the cost of our fabric because 20% of the world's cotton comes from China, and 80% of all the cotton that China produces comes directly from the Uyghurs. So that means that our fabric prices are increasing, and I know that the world's 20% of the world's cotton comes from China. However, that could be a much bigger number for the United States because a lot of the United States imports come from China. Also, we have a Panama Canal, and that Panama Canal is drying up, and that is one of the major pipelines in the United States for supplying goods. So that is another thing that's causing our prices to go up. Not only that, but we're having a problem with inflation. And I do have a video about how to curb inflation with sewing, and that's also in the description box below. But I think we're going to continue to see more inflation, and I do believe that the dollar is going to crash ultimately because of the direction that things are going. And a lot of countries are removing themselves from the US dollar. Because of all of these concerns with the US dollar, I took a course last year on how to use a inkle loom. And you're like, why would you learn how to do that? Well, the reason why I did that is so that I could learn the basics of how fabrics are made with the warp and the weft. And I figured that I could start out on this inkle, which is really small and typically only used for doing things like making belts. I thought I would start there and then try to progress upwards to making larger materials and perhaps actually making my own fabric eventually. But it is a lot to learn. So that is why I haven't progressed any farther with that. But in the future, I hope to do better and improve and learn more techniques and more skills, because I do think that we're going to have to go back to making a lot of our own stuff rather than doing imports all of the time. And I know that labor costs here in the United States are quite expensive, and that's why a lot of things are imported. But we really cannot rely on other countries for everything, because if a country were to place sanctions on us, we would be in big trouble because we don't make any of our own things. So that is just a thought. And yes, our fabric is going to continue to increase in price. So in order to curb that, we do need to start being more resourceful and recycling more materials instead of throwing old things away when we're done with them. And I think that the market of clothes out here, I guess fast fashion is what you would call it. is not such a good thing. It's better to have a quality garment made from quality materials than a not so quality garment that you're only going to wear a couple of months. And that's one thing about the thrift store thing, this trend that's going on right now, is that at least in my area, a lot of the clothes that I find at the thrift store are actually fast fashion, and the fabric is not quality. It's like polyester and those sorts of things. And really, the only quality fabric that I have found has been in men's dress shirts that tend to be either made from 100% cotton or linen or something of that nature. And those are the only fabrics that I truly sew with, and those are becoming more and more scarce in the thrift stores. So we are going to have to come up with some other solution other than just thrifting. What are you guys using for batting? For this quilt, I'm going to be using Hobbs batting, and that stuff is expensive. This is a 70 by 77 quilt, but I purchased the 45 by 60, and I bought 2 of them and plan on zigzag stitching the 2 of those together in order to make one big piece of quilt batting. And I'm doing that to try to save on some money because everything is expensive out here in these streets. So one of the way to save money is to make your own starch. So I just bought some starch from the grocery store, and I added a tablespoon to a half cup of water and stirred it up because I like my things that I iron to be quite stiff. But what I like about this is I can make it as stiff or not stiff as I want by just simply adding more water or adding more starch. So I am ironing out all of my pieces, and no, I do not show you ironing out all of my pieces because it took a few hours for me to iron out everything. All, how many pieces I say it was again? All 182 pieces of this. So guys, have you heard anything about Dollar Tree? I know that a lot of people get sewing supplies from Dollar Tree because it is cheaper. However, I heard that they're about to raise prices again, potentially. Last year, was it last year or year before last? They raised prices up to $1.25. Now they're talking about going up to $1.50. And that is just telling me or indicating to me that the dollar is becoming weaker. They need to change their name because it's no longer Dollar Tree at this point. And I know they have that section that's $3 and up or $5 and up. And I think, yikes, every time I look at that. But more and more people, I think, are going to sew because they want to recycle the things that they already have. So that is a good thing on that end. But for us who are very serious about sewing, I don't know what we're going to do about the fabric, guys. I'm just very hopeful that things will eventually work out or pan themselves out, or that we'll figure something out. And this is my first live, so I hope that you guys are enjoying the content. I know that YouTube is going to be having the vertical lives as a thing that they're promoting, so that's why I'm doing it in this format. And I hope you are enjoying the content and that you got something out of it so far. And I'll try to do more of these if I can, if you guys enjoy them. And about 2 years later, I'm still loving the iron that I have. And I do also have a video about that iron. I like the digital display, surprisingly. I didn't think I would like it, but I do. And I also like that I'm able to easily switch over to offsetting when I'm doing something else. I wasn't lying when I said these are a lot of pieces to have to try to iron and cut out. How many hours on average do you all spend cutting out pieces for a quilt? Because this was crazy to me. This is the first time that I've actually cut out this many pieces in one sitting. Now I'm just kind of pulling out the pattern piece and making sure that it matches up with the fabric. If any of the pieces do have a little bit of off in them, then I do have some extra fabric that I can use to cut a new piece. And that's just what I'm doing now. Well, I finally got done with cutting out all this fabric, and now I can truly see why so many people like pre-cuts, because this was a lot of work. Thank you guys so much for watching my live, and I will catch you on the next one.